The pickup truck that took her only cow had government plates, and two men who didn't look her in the eye when they pulled into the dirt yard. Vera Mullins stood barefoot on the porch, flour still on her hands from the biscuits she'd been stretching to last 3 days, and watched them back the trailer up to the fence line where Daisy was tied under the single cottonwood that gave shade. Her 4 kids came out behind her. The oldest, Annie, was 12. The youngest, Danny, was 5. The men didn't say good morning. The taller one unfolded a paper and held it up like it explained everything. The shorter one opened the gate and walked straight toward the cow. Vera's voice came out thin and high. "Wait, what is this?" The tall man glanced at the paper. "Court order, seizure of livestock to satisfy judgment. You were notified." "Notified of what? I never got anything." "Says here it was mailed to this address. You got 30 days to respond. You didn't respond." Vera felt the ground tilt under her feet. Respond to what? What judgment? The man folded the paper and put it in his jacket. Debt collection, commercial purchase on credit, unpaid balance, plus court costs and interest. Comes to $11,400. Vera's mouth opened, but no sound came out. $11,000. She looked at her kids standing behind her in clothes she'd bought at the church sale. She looked at Daisy, the only thing keeping them fed. Then she looked back at the man. "I don't owe anybody $11,000. You're listed as co-debtor. Name on the account is Vernon Mullins." Vernon, her ex-husband, gone 3 years now, left in the night with a woman from the bar and never looked back. She hadn't seen him since, hadn't heard from him, didn't know where he was and didn't care. But his name was still on the deed to this patch of dirt because the divorce papers were never finalized, which meant his debts were still hers. "Vernon bought feed on credit 8 years ago. I didn't even live here then. That debt's not mine." The man shrugged. "Judge says it is. You had your chance to contest it. You didn't show up." "I never got a notice." "Not my problem." The shorter man had already looped a rope around Daisy's neck and was leading her toward the trailer. Daisy pulled back, confused, mooing low and frightened. Danny started crying. Annie grabbed Vera's arm. "Before we continue, remember that this is still a small channel, and I could really use your support. Please like the video and subscribe. It's free, and it helps more than you know." Vera ran down the steps, her bare feet hitting gravel, and pulled a wad of bills from her apron pocket. It was everything she had. $63 she'd saved from cleaning houses in town, selling eggs, doing whatever work she could find that let her bring the kids along. She shoved it toward the tall man. "Here, take this. I'll get the rest. Just give me time." He didn't even look at the money. "Ma'am, the debt's been sold to a collection company. They bought the judgment. This cow's going to auction to cover what's owed, including fees. You can't pay us. You'd have to pay them, and they're not interested in payment plans. The asset's already been liquidated on paper." "Liquidated? She's not an asset. She's all we have." The shorter man had Daisy halfway up the ramp now. The cow's hooves scraped metal. She was scared, pulling against the rope, eyes rolling. Vera tried to grab the rope, but the man blocked her with his arm. "Step back, ma'am!" "Please, my kids drink her milk. We make cheese, we trade it for groceries. Without her, we have nothing." The man's face didn't change. "Should have thought about that before you ignored the court." They loaded Daisy into the trailer, latched it, and drove off. The dust hung in the air long after the sound of the engine faded. Vera stood in the yard with her kids crying behind her and $63 still clenched in her fist. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at the empty space under the cottonwood, trying to make sense of a system that could take a family's food over a debt she didn't know existed. That night, after she'd put the kids to bed hungry and lied about breakfast in the morning, Vera sat at the kitchen table with the wadded notice the man had dropped on the porch. She read it over and over until the words blurred. The debt had started at $240. Feed store credit Vernon never paid. The store went under 5 years ago. Some company bought the old debts for pennies, added interest, penalties, court fees, collection costs, attorney fees. $240 became $11,000, and because Vernon's name was on the property deed as joint owner, the judgment attached to her. She traced the timeline with her finger. The debt was sold 3 times before it landed with the collection company. Each sale added a processing fee. Each month added compound interest at 18%. The court filing added $1,200 in attorney costs for a case that never went to trial. The seizure order added another $800 for the sheriff's office. A paralegal she'd never met had billed 4 hours at $200 an hour to prepare documents she'd never seen. The math was right there on the page, legal and precise, turning $240 of chicken feed into a number that could destroy her family. She called the phone number at the bottom of the notice. A recorded voice told her the office was closed, to call back during business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, hours she spent cleaning houses, hours she couldn't afford to miss. She didn't have a lawyer, couldn't afford one. She called the legal aid office in town the next morning from a gas station payphone, the kids waiting in the borrowed truck. The woman who answered sounded tired, booked for 6 months. Domestic cases and evictions took priority. Civil debt collection didn't qualify as urgent. Vera asked what she was supposed to do in the meantime. The woman suggested filing a motion pro se. Vera asked what that meant. Representing yourself, the woman said, then gave her the courthouse address and hung up. At the courthouse, Vera stood in line for 40 minutes, holding Danny's hand while he whined about being hungry. The clerk, a man with glasses on a neck chain, looked at her paperwork and shook his head. You needed to file a response within 20 days of service. The certified mail receipt showed delivery 8 weeks ago. To an address she hadn't lived at in 4 years, Vera said. Not my problem, the clerk said. You can file a motion to reconsider, but the judge rarely grants those without new evidence. What counts as new evidence? Vera asked. The clerk shrugged. A lawyer would know. Everything had a deadline, and every deadline had already passed, and nobody seemed to think that was strange. But Vera wasn't someone who gave up. She'd survived Vernon, survived being left alone with 4 kids in a falling-down house. She'd figure this out. She asked around. A woman at church knew someone who'd had a car repossessed by the same collection company. That woman gave Vera a name, Luther Grimm. He ran a scrapyard and impound lot on the edge of the county. Bought seized property at auction for next to nothing, flipped it fast. If Daisy had gone to auction, Grimm probably bought her. Vera borrowed a neighbor's truck, promising to have it back by evening, and drove out there with Annie in the passenger seat. The girl was quiet the whole ride, hands folded in her lap, old enough to understand what losing Daisy meant, but too young to know what to say. Annie had asked once if they were going to get Daisy back. Vera hadn't answered. She didn't know how to promise something she couldn't guarantee. The lot sat behind a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, full of rusted cars and farm equipment baking in the heat. A hand-painted sign read, Grimm Salvage, Cash Paid. A double-wide trailer served as the office, its vinyl siding cracked and peeling. The place smelled like motor oil and rot. A man in a stained undershirt sat on the steps drinking from a can, belly hanging over his belt, a dog on a chain beside him. The dog was thin, ribs showing, and it didn't even lift its head when Vera got out. She walked up to the fence, Annie a few steps behind. The man watched them come, didn't stand, didn't move, just took another drink and waited. Up close, Vera could see his eyes were flat, bored. This was routine for him. She was just another person who'd lost something and come begging to get it back. A woman in a faded dress stood near the trailer holding a cardboard box, crying quietly. She got into a rusted sedan and drove away without looking back. Vera's stomach turned. How many people came here like this? How many left with nothing? I'm looking for a cow that was auctioned 2 days ago. The man looked her over, spit into the dirt. What about it? She's mine. I need her back. She ain't yours. She's mine. Bought her legal. How much did you pay? $300. Vera felt her stomach turn. $300. They'd taken a cow worth $1,500 at least. Sold her for $300 to cover a debt that started at $240. She pulled out the $63. I'll give you this now and bring the rest in 2 weeks. The man laughed. I don't do layaway. Besides, she's already sold. Sold to who? Meat buyer. Picking her up tomorrow. Vera's hands started shaking. Where is she? The man pointed toward the back of the lot. In the pen, but you can't go back there. Vera didn't wait for permission. She walked along the fence line until she found a gate, pushed it open, and walked into the lot. The man yelled something behind her, but she didn't stop. She found the pen near the far corner. Daisy was standing in the sun, no shade, no water, ribs showing, head down. The cow looked up when Vera called her name, made a low, tired sound. Vera felt something break open inside her chest, something she'd been holding shut for 3 years, maybe longer. Every humiliation, every bill she couldn't pay, every night she'd lain awake, trying to figure out how to stretch nothing into enough. It all came up at once, hot and jagged. She didn't think. She climbed over the fence, the barbed wire catching her shirt, tearing it. Annie called after her, but Vera didn't stop. She ran to the water spigot on the side of the shed, rust-stained and dripping, found a dented bucket half buried in the weeds, shook the dirt out and filled it. Her hands were shaking so hard, water slopped over the sides. When she turned around, the man from the office was there, bigger up close, arms crossed, blocking the path to the pen. He wasn't in a hurry. He was smiling, the kind of smile that said he'd done this before, that he knew exactly how this ended. "You're trespassing," he said, voice flat. Vera's chest was heaving, her shirt torn, her hands wet and cold despite the heat. She looked past him at Daisy, at the pen, at the bucket in her hands. "She's dying of thirst." The man shrugged. "She's inventory. I'll water her when I feel like it." That's when Vera tried to push past him. That's when he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks, wrenched the bucket away, and shoved her backward with his other hand. Vera hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of her lungs, dirt in her mouth. The bucket rolled away, water spilling into the dust, disappearing into nothing. "I told you to stay out." "She needs water. Not your problem." Vera carried the bucket toward the pen. The man grabbed her arm, the bucket tipped, water spilling into the dirt. Vera pulled free, tried to fill it again. The man shoved her, hard. Vera fell backward, hit the ground, the bucket clattering away. She lay there in the dirt, Daisy's desperate mooing filling her ears, and felt the weight of every humiliation she'd swallowed in her life pressed down at once. That's when she heard the voices. 3 kids, maybe 16 or 17, standing on the other side of the fence with phones out. They'd been walking past, saw the commotion, started recording. One of them yelled, "Hey, leave her alone!" The man turned, saw the phones, his face going red. "Get out of here!" The kids didn't move. One of them, a girl in a school sweatshirt, kept filming. "We're calling the police!" The man spit again and walked back toward the office, muttering. Vera got up slowly, brushed the dirt off her jeans. The kids were still there, phones still out. The girl with the sweatshirt called over, "You okay?" Vera nodded, even though she wasn't. She looked at Daisy, then at the kids, then at the bucket still lying in the dirt. She didn't know what to say. The kids left. Vera climbed back over the fence and drove home. That night, the video went up. By morning, it had been shared 4,000 times. By noon, it was on local news. By evening, it had gone national. The footage was shaky but clear enough. A woman on the ground, crying, reaching for a bucket of water, a man standing over her, shoving, a cow tied in the sun, no shade, no water, waiting to be slaughtered. The caption read, "They took her cow over a $240 debt. Now she's trying to save it from dying of thirst." The comment section exploded. People were furious, not just at the collection company or the scrapyard owner, but at a system that let it happen. Lawyers started reaching out, offering to take the case pro bono. Animal welfare groups called for an investigation. A local pastor organized a protest outside the courthouse. Someone started a crowdfund. By the second day, it had raised $18,000. Grimm tried to give interviews, tried to explain he'd done nothing illegal, but every time he opened his mouth, it made things worse. The meat buyer, who was supposed to pick up Daisy, called and cancelled. The collection company issued a statement saying they were reviewing the case. The county clerk's office, flooded with calls, started looking into how the original notice had been served. 3 days after the video went up, a lawyer named Fiona Branch walked into Vera's kitchen with a briefcase and a smile. She was young, sharp, worked for a firm out of Tulsa that did class action work. She'd driven 2 hours to get there. "We're filing an emergency motion to void the seizure. The original debt was from a sole proprietorship account in your ex-husband's name. The creditor never properly served notice at your actual residence. The address on file was an old one. You never had a chance to contest the claim. That's a due process violation." Vera sat across from her, hands folded on the table. "Will it work? It'll work. The attention helps. When a judge knows the whole state is watching, procedure suddenly matters again." The hearing was set for the following week. Fiona filed motions. The collection company's lawyer showed up looking annoyed, argued that everything had been done by the book. But Fiona had copies of the mailing records. The notice had been sent to an address Vera hadn't lived at in 4 years. The court had marked it as served anyway. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, looked at the records, looked at Vera, looked at the lawyer for the collection company. Why wasn't a second attempt made to locate the debtor? The lawyer shuffled papers. "Your Honor, our client purchased the judgment in good faith. That's not what I asked." Silence. The judge took off her glasses, set them on the bench. "The seizure is void. The cow is to be returned immediately. The original debt is reinstated at its original amount, without added penalties. And Mrs. Mullins is granted a payment plan at her request. This case is dismissed." The gavel came down. Vera sat there, not sure she'd heard it right. Fiona squeezed her hand. "We won!" 2 days later, a county animal control truck pulled up to Vera's house. An officer got out, opened the trailer. Daisy walked down the ramp, slow and tired, but alive. The kids ran out screaming, hugging the cow's neck. Vera stood on the porch crying for the first time since it started. Not from sadness, but from relief so deep it hurt. The system had tried to crush her over a debt she didn't owe, sold her only source of food for a fraction of its value, and told her it was legal. It would have stayed legal if 3 kids with phones hadn't stopped to film, if people hadn't cared, if a lawyer hadn't decided to fight. That's what scared Vera most. Not what had happened, but how close it came to being permanent. How close she came to losing everything because the machine didn't bother to check if the address was right. Daisy's back in the pen now, under the cottonwood, eating grass the kids cut fresh every morning. The crowdfund money paid off the original debt and bought feed for a year. Fiona took the case further, filed a class action against the collection company on behalf of others who'd been railroaded the same way. Grimm's scrapyard got cited for animal neglect and lost his state license to buy livestock. The system didn't fix itself. People fixed it by refusing to look away. That's the only justice Vera trusts now, not the kind that comes from a courtroom, but the kind that comes from voices loud enough to make power uncomfortable. Because when you're poor and alone, the law doesn't protect you unless someone's watching.